Once again, you find me on the golf course, and as before, I'm not a golfer, and this time there's no snow. But I wanted to do this not as a philosophical walk and talk, but just as an introduction to another video. Now, a couple of days ago, I found an old hard drive, and I plugged it in, and there was various files on it, a couple of videos, and I thought, well, I wonder what they are. So with a sense of dread and trepidation, I opened the files, only to find that one of them was the 2018 Knackcon video that I'd recorded on my iPhone 7. Now, I was a guest speaker there along with Julian Kirkness and Mike Moore and a few others, and I'm sitting on the front row balancing my iPhone, and I recorded the whole hour keynote speech of the then founder and co-owner Brandon Griggs. Now, I appreciate this video will have a really super niche viewing because it's only from those people that have been Knack users or Knack developers for a few years that this will have any kind of historical relevance. But Brandon does talk through the history of Knack from when it started, the fact it was originally called App Now Go, and it was a start-up, and some of the trials and tribulations they had of getting the product off the ground. Now, if you're fairly new to Knack, then you'll be completely unaware of Brandon. And he left the company in 2022, and it was taken over then by Resurgent Technology. And I think that was a really good thing, because I spoke to Brandon years ago, and he said one of the challenges he had was that he wanted to grow the product. And to grow the product, you actually needed better features. And to get more features, you needed more money. And to get more money, you needed more customers. So it was kind of a vicious circle, catch-22. So Resurgent Technology came along and injected a substantial amount of cash and time and energy into the business. And I think it's gone from strength to strength. Now, obviously, I've now retired, and I thought it was a poignant moment in time to dig this video out and put it onto my YouTube channel and see if it stirs any memories. Some of you may have even been there. If you weren't, I hope you enjoyed the video. I say it's an hour long, so I don't expect you to watch it all. It's great bedtime viewing. It's probably be excellent for insomnia. It's completely unedited. It was just shot holding a phone kind of on my lap at the convention. But I thought it was a great snapshot in time, and the fact that I've now reached the end of my Knack commercial career, I thought it was a good opportunity to share this. So enjoy it. If you do see it, if you've got any comments, stick them below. Be interesting to read it. Be interesting to see if you were there. Ironically, one of my old clients was there, and I didn't even know. And I worked with him for many years. So yeah. Anyway, I'll go and enjoy. And don't forget, I'm not done yet. Cheers. Bye.
But we're thrilled to be here in London. We deliberately thought this was a perfect place for us to kind of start with the conference experience. We knew that we could kind of keep it intimate and really focus on providing value for everyone here and not get too bogged down in logistics of a giant space or a big crowd. So thank you all for coming again. You're the reason why we built Knack. You're the reason why we're here, and we're thrilled to hear your stories, and we want to hear more of them. I heard a bunch of great stories last night, and they're just really gratifying. Especially as a remote company, it can be difficult sometimes to get in front of our customers and hear the stories, and we're hearing the impact that it's making, and it's tremendous, and we want to hear more of that. But yeah, the other thing is London is a fantastic city, of course, and for most of us, this is the first time that we've been here. We have a few that first time they've been to Europe. I think Steve was in London once. But that's it. So of course, we've had to do some of the tourist stuff. That's us getting a proper pint there. Nick looks a little still on the fence, but I definitely enjoyed mine. Here's Steve holding a press conference. I'm assuming he's apologizing for a questionable transfer. Here's me contemplating how I found myself in high tea and wondering why I'm so underdressed. And finally, here's me using a cell phone in a telephone booth. I don't know why I included that one, but I like it. Enough about that. So one of the things I want to talk about today is really try to give everyone here more of the story behind the company of Knack. Who we are, some of our values, where we're kind of going with the product. And before I wanted to get into that, I actually wanted to say that I do have a connection, brief or a distant connection with Lincoln. My father-in-law is actually from Birmingham. So he actually met my wife's mother in Bermuda and then moved to the States and has been living there ever since. But he's gotten me accustomed to some of the British culture. So I came in, it wasn't all culture shock. So one of the things, he's from Birmingham, of course, so he got me into soccer. Decided to inflict his grandchildren with Aston Villa onesies. And of course, ever since they've been relegated, I'm always mention that every chance I get. And wonder if he's trying to give my children inferiority complex. Yeah, he's actually great because the first time, or the second time rather, that we met, they were throwing a July 4th barbecue, which Independence Day in the US. And he immediately said, you know what we call that in the UK? Good riddance day. So I knew that he had, by virtue of that, he also introduced us to a little bit of the British humor, and if everyone here has a similar sense of humor, we'll get along just fine. But yeah, want to get into today a little bit more on the past, present, and future, and why you should care, because it's not just, I think we have kind of a unique origin story. You probably all have gotten a sense of that we're kind of a unique type of company, or at least we like to think so. And a lot of our past really informs both our present, of course, and our future, and the things that we really care about. So yeah, let's start with the past. Go all the way back to the beginning. In our past, it's not exactly Silicon Valley. A lot of people last night asked me, like, how'd you get started? Why would you even do this? It seems crazy. And of course, starting a company is crazy. And the common kind of romanticized notion is it's two people that were bored sitting in a bar, they're writing ideas out on a cocktail napkin, somehow eureka forms, and the next, Silicon Valley success story happens. And that's almost always not the case. Those are the companies that are rarely successful. And the most successful companies are often ones that are rooted in solving a problem, a real problem. And that's kind of very much their origin story. They saw something out there that was such a pronounced problem, they felt a passion that there was something unique that they could do to solve it. And that's what gets them over all of the humps of building a company, which I know there's a lot of you here that are building and have built companies, extraordinarily hard. But for us, it goes way back to a web design website agency that my co-founder Eric and I ran. And our focus was on content management systems, so CMS. This was before the ubiquity of Squarespace, Weebly, Wix, WordPress, these types of things. And we would do our standard content management things, like we had calendars and image galleries, all the normal stuff. But invariably, our customers would come back to us and be like, hey, we've got all these users, we want them to log in and see all of their invoices. We got a user, we want them to log in and search all of our products. We've got this spreadsheet of 1 million items. We want them to be able to come in and put in a number and find it. And hopefully some of this is starting to sound like some Knack things that everyone here, is doing in some of the apps. But we would do these bespoke from scratch every single time. And if anyone in here is a programmer, if you've programmed one CSV import or one spreadsheet import, you've programmed one too many. It's just agonizing to do that kind of work. Eventually we got, we could probably start generalizing this a little bit more, building a foundation, so instead of doing these from scratch, we have a code foundation that we can just tweak a little bit for each new customer. And as we did more and more of this, it got more and more abstract, and eventually we had the bright idea, instead of let's actually code these at all, let's come up with a language that can describe what these applications should be, and then we'll have our code kind of interpret that to run the actual application. In essence, that's kind of what Knack is. You all use the builder to describe your application, and then our code base kind of takes to that to form functional applications. And eventually, it dawned on us like, what if we could actually build a web app that could build these web apps? And we've always been very product-oriented, even though we ran a service company here. Because it was our own CMS that we were building, we were kind of getting familiar with how running a software company would work. We found it very appealing. One of the great things about a product company versus a service company is there's literally no ceiling on your leverage. So if you run a service company, and I'm sure there's people here that do, you can only really grow by adding HR, right? You can only really grow by adding people. But the great thing with a product company, especially with software, is I can give you my software, and then I can also still have it to give to this person, and literally everyone in the world. So just in terms of the impact, we thought that would be really appealing. But products are really hard. We had experimented with a few products before around the CMS space, and they never really took off. But we learned a lot of lessons, and by seeing our actual customers with these problems, we knew that this one was unique. This one was one that we really wanted to try. And I think the takeaway here is that this is grounded in experience. So the product that you're using now actually originates in solving real problems. And it always has, and that's something that still guides our product making decisions today. In the future, it's like often our features is not looking 5 years ahead and trying to anticipate trends and such. Like, of course, those are factors, but primary factor is what are the problems that everyone here is having and how can we best solve them? Data, of course, is a gigantic problem universe, and there's a million different ways to solve it. And one of the things that makes this space so much fun is that there's this sweet spot of simplicity and usability. And so many people that are in this space kind of lend on one way or the other. And we really enjoy being able to understand what are the features that make this functional, that add utility to your data, but it's still usable. It's still easy for everyone to use. Doesn't require a computer science degree to actually create these types of applications. So this started very early on, and it still guides very much what we're doing today. So yeah, we decided to eventually take this in the product, and the first thing that we struggled with was a name. And of course, in the internet world, everything is taken. Everything in its derivative is taken. Not only the .coms, but the gets this and HQs that and .ios and all these kind of things. And we tried everything in the book. I think the one that I remember the most is Appenstein. We were getting so desperate, like, okay, let's try Appenstein. And of course, that was taken. There was already like. So eventually, we're just like, forget it. We're just going to come up with a code word, and I'm going to show this, but everyone has to promise no photography. We decided to call it App Now Go. Woo! Because it was so immediate and easy, and the exclamation point really just pulled it all together. But this is actually one of our first prototypes. We tried to get cute with calling it guts and graphics, but eventually we realized that we could only get so cute. We were kind of fighting too much common nomenclature, so we started to get back to using data and schema and that kind of thing. We quickly found out that using this horizontal approach was not sustainable because, of course, as our users started using it, that just kept going on in perpetuity. And I've seen some of your schemas where it says, "Whoa, that's a lot of objects." A lot of this, of course, didn't work, but you definitely do see some similarities here with the field types and the connections and that kind of thing. And what was so key about having our website agency is that we were able to start replacing some of those custom codes with what we were doing here. So it was a great kind of laboratory to both start to develop this, but to develop this with actual use cases. Again, no photos, please. But we eventually decided to put this beauty up. Give that a second to sink in. But yeah, sign up for our beta, and this was another key for us because, again, it's such a big space. This is a type of product where we could add features forever. Everyone here, I guarantee you, has some feature that no one else in the room wants, but they consider absolutely critical. And if I went up to each of you and asked, hey, what's that one feature that we should add? There might be a few commonalities, but I would get 80% absolute differences. So, of course, our very early beta, we had like 2 features, and almost everything that anyone put up. And I'll say this, like when they clicked the sign up for the beta, we really had them describe exactly what they wanted to build. And of course, they couldn't actually build it. We didn't even give them access to the builder. But what we did was we used that to work with them to both build it for them, kind of as proof of concept, like, hey, can this code that we're doing actually work? And also to flesh out some early features. So someone come on and say like, oh, I want to log in. We're like, sure, we can do logins. And then really quickly get that up. And that actually worked really well. We kind of struggled for a while to think about how we could get traction, how we could kind of start to approach this space with a very limited feature set, and that was very early key for us to kind of get off the ground. We did that for a while, and we were eventually like, okay, this is great, but at some point we need to see if someone will actually pay for this. So we decided that we actually had to start marketing it and charging for it. That was the key all along. But still, we were like, oh, that name, like we knew we could not go public with this. Like we were actually going to start to try to get some press and do a little AdWords experimentation. Like this clearly wasn't going to fly. So I actually sequestered myself for a weekend with the idea that, okay, by Sunday night, like whatever I've got, that's what we're going with. And I remember just going through so many synonyms in thesaurus. I know we wanted it to be really easy. I was hoping to get some connotation of simplicity or just building things quickly, speed. And eventually we came around to Knack, which, as you all know, well, to bring my father-in-law back in, I remember quite proudly saying to him, yeah, we've come up to a name, it's Knack, we think it's great. It's very short, simple, there's really no other products or services. He's like, you might want to rethink that one. And apparently there's some, shall we say, interesting connotations of Knack and all of its varieties here in the UK that he was concerned about. So I guess there should be some extra things here for overcoming those to actually give Knack a try. But yeah. Oh, yeah. And one of the main takeaways here is that clearly we don't care that much about marketing. Clearly we don't care that much about spending precious resources on the fluff of sales and marketing. We've always very much been a product-first company. That's going to continue. We still don't have a full-time marketer. We never have. We don't really have full-time salespeople. That's going to change as we kind of migrate from what we call a build phase into a growth phase. We look forward to certainly expanding the potential impact that Knack can have. But for the most part, we've been a product-first company. And of course, a lot of how we've gotten traction has been because of people like you that become early converts, that spread the word, that show it to other people that have a problem. That's been a massive win for us to kind of really focus on product and not have to worry about, so many startups have to worry about marketing. They just can't get eyeballs, they can't get signups. Fortunately, we never had that problem. And we've been incredibly fortunate because we've been able to, we just haven't had to worry about it. We've been able to focus on product. So that's been great. But anyway, eventually we settled on this and launched with Knack. Totally lost my notes. Oh, here we go. Launched with this. And the early customers, actually, here's the actual financial analytics of our first week of launch. 8 new customers. Woo. $80 whole in revenue. Average revenue per customer, $19.66. I can't tell you how excited each and every one of those 8 customers made us. We had about 4 the first time we flipped it on, and it's you get paranoid. You're checking oh, does our e-commerce work? Does the Stripe thing work? Does their internet even work? Why is no one signing up? Was there a worldwide catastrophe that I'm not aware of that's preventing them from signing up? But we got all 8 that first week, and that was great. And that approach also is the approach that we take today. We essentially have built Knack one customer at a time. We're in what in the United States is called bootstrap, which means that we've taken no investment from venture capital. I like to say that our customers are our investors, not just in the financial revenue that they give us to grow, but in how they influence our product and how much value we put into their feedback. And the main thing that bootstrapped, the appeal that it has for me, is that we have complete control. We can build the exact company that we want to build. And I like to call it growth without compromise. The typical Silicon Valley approach is growth at all costs, and I'm sure you hear a lot about it in the press with the negative ramifications that can have, whether it's around security, whether it's around workforce dynamics, whether it's around just compromised ethics and scammy adding, all those types of things. Those are things that we just will refuse to do and will never do. And just not having that third-party financial influence that is going to make us compromise our decisions has always been hugely important to us. And that lets us really kind of define our values and hold true to those. So one of the things that's really big for us is giving back, not just having a nonprofit discount, which a lot of people do, but I kind of roll my eyes at because oh, they're still charging you, great, you're not really giving back. So one of the things that's really important for us, we actually give a percentage of our profits each year to nonprofits. And we have the team pick which charities they want to devote to. And one of my greatest pride points is that we've been able to donate over $100,000 from Knack to nonprofits. And it's something I'm super proud of, and of course the team is super proud of as well. So eventually, we got to the point where Knack, we kind of want to keep growing this, but we started with Knack HQ and Get Knack and a couple of those. And we knew that we wanted Knack.com because this is a big data service. We want to get governments and big corporations, of course, and they see a Knack HQ and they're like, oh, who are these guys? Are they going to be around? We need Knack.com. And these guys were the ones that had Knack.com. And I tried for 6 months to get in touch with them, find out who it was. I did all the DNS searches of all the different names, and of course some of them was the band members, but all my emails and calls went unanswered. And I almost wrote it off, but then I saw another kind of startup, it's called Baremetrics, I believe, where he had used a service to get some of his domain names, and it was actually GoDaddy. And at the time, I don't know if you remember, but GoDaddy had some very lewd ads, like they were very kind of sexist driven. And at the time I was like, oh, I want nothing to do with GoDaddy. He was like, oh, but they have a great service. I was like, fine, I'll try it. And they actually made contact with the e-commerce manager, and the interaction went so much more smoothly than I thought. I thought they were going to come back with this astronomical number that would just be utterly ridiculous, and I'd be like, no way, we can't do it. They actually ran the numbers, so Knack.com forwarded to the Knack.com. They actually ran the numbers on how much e-commerce revenue was generated from traffic forward to there. They added like a moderate percentage on that, like a 10%, and gave us the price. I was like, done. Like, I didn't even negotiate. It was so much lower than I thought. I was just like, yes, now. Just what do I have to do? And we ended up getting Knack.com. And just to give you some indication of how fortunate I feel like we were, we got an offer from a VC-backed company about 3 months later that offered 8 times as much as what we paid for it. So that gives you a little indication of the domain name real estate and how crazy it can get. And of course, there's some pretty fun stories of startups that have done some crazy things to get their domains, have given up equity, that kind of thing. So I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to get Knack.com. And that was a big milestone for us. Like as we've grown in Bootstrap, of course, one of the main things that Bootstrap does, it just makes every dollar incredibly precious. And you have to make sure that the return on that dollar is there. You just can't take big gambles. So this felt like, oh, we're at a point now where like we can really do this. This is great. And of course, as we've grown, we've gotten more and more, and as all of you have seen, and how we've kind of matured as a company. And this was a great milestone. And of course, you know, last but not least, but the big win with our culture and the fact that we're bootstrapping to find our company is definitely our team. And this is one that kind of caught me by surprise because, of course, as being a product guy, I can't even look at that without laughing. Being a product guy, you know, I never would have guessed that the team was going to be so important in terms of how much pride I took into it. And I can say now that after having built both a product and a team, you know, it's close, but I take more pride actually in the team that we've built. And we go out of our way to really find alignment on cultures beyond a paycheck. We want to find people that are really invested in the problem that we're solving, that really enjoy working with the team. One of the things that Eric and I decided very early on was if we were going to give up this website agency, which financially was doing fine, we wanted to make sure that we weren't just focused on the destination, that the journey was going to be super important for us. And of course, the team is such a major component of that. Just having a team that you love to get up each day with, go to work, really push each other to get better. And part of what I'm so excited about the future is not only seeing what the Knack product can do, but seeing what this team could do. And ultimately what that means is people matter. And I hope that everyone here has gotten a sense of that just with their interaction with our team. Hopefully with the interaction here, you're probably going to notice that they don't feel like employees really. They don't feel like someone that is just there for a paycheck. And that's something that's super important. So that's our past. So kind of getting to what that brilliant team is working on, we're definitely hard at work. And I mentioned it a little bit before that we've kind of been in this build phase and we're starting to transition into a growth phase. But we knew that to even have a realistic growth phase, that there were some key foundational areas that we really had to shore up. So bootstrapping, it was always about moving fast and just trying to survive, honestly, very early on. Like that's kind of the bootstrapping ethos. And of course we got over that hump and we realized that, okay, like we've got product market fit, we're really solving this problem. But to take this to the next level, we've really started to get serious about some things. And for us, those big buckets have been security, performance, and being much more responsive, and I'll get into what I mean by that. But of course, security has been a huge one. GDPR, that's a thing here? So GDPR, of course, has been a big near-term incentive to certainly shore up security. And this is something that has probably been one of our primary focuses, both in terms of infrastructure, but legal policies as well. So infrastructure, of course, has been a huge undertaking with GDPR, making sure data is isolated. We've done a ton of work there. Some of the corresponding security requirements in the US are HIPAA, which is patient policy. Some of you might be aware of it. That's also, we've kind of timed it with that to do a ton of work. But we're quite pleased with where we're going. We feel like we're getting on the other side of that and feeling quite good about where we are from the security perspective. Yeah, and from the infrastructure perspective, the other thing that we're starting to do is engage with third-party people to do legitimate audits. So kind of like the magical audit word is SOC 1, SOC 2. And one of the massive pains of security is everyone comes to us with these like 50-page forms, like, oh, can you please, if you don't mind, if you have a little time, can you please fill out this 50-questionnaire security document that our IT team has got? And then if we like what we see, we might ask you to fill out 50 more. And then we might pay you something in 6 months. So SOC 2 is kind of like, it makes all that go away. It's like, oh, you're SOC 2, brilliant. Like, we know that you've gone through the absolute most rigorous audits. So that's something that we're currently in the position of wrapping up. So we're super excited about that. I'm having to scroll through my notes here, which is certainly making this annoying. Yeah, so legal is another huge part of what we've done. So over the past year, we've engaged with a couple legal teams. Of course, that's been big for GDPR. Both internally, we've had to get some things kind of to align with some of those legal requirements. And we've also readjusted all of our terms and policies. They've gone through a complete legal overhaul, both from a HIPAA and GDPR compliance. That's something that 5 years ago I wouldn't have thought that I'm spending the majority of my weeks reviewing GDPR documents, but here we are. And hopefully that it settles down a little bit now. And again, this now becomes this foundation that we can feel good about from a security perspective going forward. Other big thing is policies. As a small remote team, we've kind of had a loose culture, and that's been great. We give each of our teammates a huge amount of autonomy and trust, and that's part of our culture. But there can be times where that can conflict with very strict security legalities. So we've kind of had to rethink that and come up with a lot of policies internally to kind of guide what we're doing. So for example, there's certain high secure areas where our team can't even access it without permission. Like they just aren't able to. So doing kind of whitelisting like that. And that's been something we've been spending a lot of time on. And again, are wrapping up and feeling great about. The other thing that we can do now too with security is we can set up dedicated hardware for some of our larger and enterprise customers and do completely customized secure settings. So like we've got some customers that are whitelisting specific traffic. Only traffic from this location can actually access any of our data. No one else can. We can set up custom regions. So like Australia and Canada are now starting to get into similar GDPR type restrictions. We can set up servers in Canada, in Australia, private servers for them. And eventually we plan to add data centers all over. Like right now our European one is in Frankfurt, but really expanding that. So we now have the security in place where we can more rapidly expand in that way. Performance is the next one. So performance, of course, isn't just about speed, but of course that's a part of it. But it's also about reliability and what I'll call usability. So speed is definitely one that's always been on our mind. The difficulty of doing a product that can kind of be everything for everyone is we often have to optimize for the macro case before we can optimize for the micro case. But everyone here, of course, is the micro case, and that's the only one that you care about, right? It's your app, your performance. And one of the things that we've been doing just from a technical standpoint, two major technological initiatives. I won't get too much into the weeds, but one, we're transitioning from a document-driven data approach using what was Mongo and moving that into a SQL approach. And early on, the document approach works super well because everyone here can define your own database, right? Like, and a document approach really makes it more flexible to kind of define a database schema. But we decided that some of the performance hits just weren't worth it. And there's also a few things that functionality, it kind of made very difficult. And moving our kind of data storage to more of a SQL-driven model is going to enable us to have all that functionality, be way more performant, but also get into some really smart indexing. We're going to be able to do some things in the future, really, like machine learning, and be able to analyze, like, oh, this person's account keeps having long queries for this specific query. Let's automatically add an index there, so that can be automatic. In the indexing world, it basically means we're going to say that this data is always getting requested, so we're going to make it much more immediate, so people don't have to do deep searches for it. We can just immediately return it, so it's way, way faster. So in the database world, indexes are super important. And kind of moving to SQL is going to enable us to do all sorts of things like that. So from just a speed perspective, that's going to be great. Of course, you want your speed to be reliable. You want it all the time. And one of the problems with a shared environment that we started with was what we call the noisy neighbor syndrome. So in other words, someone over here might be all of a sudden sending, not really looking at you, Mike. It could be. Could be all of a sudden, you know, they promote their app or whatever, and they're sending a ton of traffic to their app. And because it's in a shared environment, you might notice that your app slowed down, but you're not sure why. And it's because Mike was the noisy neighbor. He kind of started taking up more resources on our shared environment than we thought that we anticipated, and other people noticed. And it's something that we've done a ton of work to mitigate, but we're also moving to a technical approach called containers, which is kind of what it sounds. It's each person kind of gets their own container technology, and it's a way that kind of virtualizes the shared environment, but does it in a way that everyone's kind of very much siloed. And what it means is that we can be much more one-to-one on the resources that we're providing everyone, and that you're the only one that can consume those resources. So it really removes that notion of a noisy neighbor syndrome, and it's going to make it much more consistent. The other thing about reliable that we put a lot of investment in is just the team, the support. Of course, everyone here, especially that have been with us for a while, you know that we've been predominantly a US-based team, which of course has reflected a US-based support hours. And a major wish list item has been US support or EU support and 24-hour coverage, and that's something that it's definitely taken us a while, but we hired our first specific EU support person. He's based out of Sweden. There's only one of them right now, so be gentle. But we're excited about that for sure. And we also have, it's been in the works in a while, but we've finally put the final piece on 24-hour emergency support. So we have active monitoring now, and alerting and logging on anything that could possibly go wrong at any time. I was telling a couple folks last night that even with all the work that we do, there's always that like one little 15-minute window that happens to be like, it's always on like a Saturday morning when, you know, the worst possible time where everything that could go wrong actually does go wrong, to create this perfect storm of things that line up to create downtime. That's kind of, as we've matured, that's what it takes now to surface these types of issues, but we're excited about the 24-hour support. Along with that, we also have spent a lot of time, we have a full QA team now, which stands for quality assurance, which means that as we're deploying new features, new code, it's going through very rigorous testing. It's going through a whole suite of checks that it does to ensure that everything that we release isn't compromising functionality that exists. It's not compromising your data. The term data sanctity is a term that we throw out a lot. So basically anything that has the potential to lose your data, corrupt your data, or have it be inaccurate in any way, that is always top of mind and 100% priority. So building a QA team that's constantly thinking about that, especially as we're releasing new features, has been something that we put a lot of time into. We also just recently hired a specific, what's called DevOps, developer operations, which their whole goal is to make sure that we can release things faster in a much safer way, so that as you see new features coming in, you can have confidence that, you know, everything else is working great. It didn't break existing functionality. my data is still secure. So again, we feel like this is going to put us in a foundation that we can grow because things are now performant. We've got a lot of confidence in everyone's getting a reliable experience, and that the features that we're putting out are not going to compromise anything as well. And the final piece is usability. So the more that you guys can do everything with the software yourselves, the less that you have to engage in support, then of course the higher our time can be leveraged. So the more usable that we can make the product, of course the better. And we've actually been spending the last year and a half redesigning our builder to make that way more usable. I'll actually be showing a sneak peek of that a little bit later today in the pipeline preview. And that's important for two reasons. One, it's, as I mentioned, to make it usable for everyone here, but we also completely re-architected the code base using some modern frameworks that are going to enable us to much more rapidly iterate on the code base. Right now the code base, or about a year ago, the code base was representing those early bootstrap years and all the things that we built on top of it. And of course, everything that we added, as of last week, we never anticipated potentially even using from day one. So there's a lot of mismatch. The original architecture never really anticipated some of the things that we're doing now. So this gave us a chance to rethink everything and optimize it for what we know now. And we're really excited about how quickly that's going to enable our entire development team to go in there and add features and really iterate on the product. Finally, we want to become a more responsive company. And basically what I mean by that is everyone here. We want to get much faster at translating what you're telling us into what the product is doing. So basically converting everyone here into our actual product. And there's a few things that we had to do to do that. Software engineering is very difficult. I'm sure there's some people here that do it. Everything from the planning to the speccing to the approval to the QA. It's very difficult. So we've spent a lot of time really getting our internal processes in place so that we can understand what your needs are, we can be prioritizing that, we can see the value that it's getting, how broadly it could impact the product, understanding all the different channels that we can get that, becoming more data driven, trying to get as much exposure to your feedback, your impact as we possibly can, and then putting things in place so that internally we can rapidly figure out what's the most important thing that we should be working on right now and getting that to you as quickly as we can. So this is really the ultimate goal of everything that I've talked about. We want to get to this state, and we think getting to this state is going to be huge, and all of the previous kind of foundational elements that I was describing was to get here. So let's move into our future. I know we're getting a little late on time here. So where are we going? Data is not going anywhere. The data ecosystem is exploding. I think the one thing that we're never going to get away from is that vision that we had from day one, which is how can we make it easy to do useful things with your data? So that's not going anywhere. But of course the data ecosystem is exploding. It's a great time to be data, if you happen to be data. There's brilliant SaaS products for virtually everything. Everyone has an open API that makes it super easy to move data in and out. There's services like Zapier and Integromat that we actually have some sessions on today that make it easy to connect it together. But on the other hand, all of that creates potential to make a giant mess of things. And this is let's see if this works. This is a pixel artist I'm a fan of. It might crash my computer. But we kind of see more of this, where like you've got some useful things, but you're not sure where your data is coming from. It's coming from a million places. It's doing some useful things over here, but you're not sure exactly how it got there. Maybe someone changed it, but you couldn't quite track that. You can have it do some useful things down here, but you'd really like to do that. How do you make this secure? And we see Knack as kind of playing that role of the headquarters of your data. So that central repository that you can have confidence that here's where my data is, here's where it's secure, here's where I can track what happened to it, how it got here, who changed it, and also make it actually useful. So one of the ways that that's called is a system of record, which is kind of the source of truth. Here's where we know our data is, that we can rely on it, we can move it in and out. So part of our future vision for Knack is making Knack more amenable to this, to being the HQ of your data. And a big part of the system of record is confidence. Do you have confidence in your data? And one of the things that we have now, which we think plays into this, is the record history. So we give you access, of course, to here's all the versions of your records, here's who's changed them, here's when. And we want to move into making that much more usable, so that right now it's difficult to kind of search and find it. We want to add even more information there. We want to make it easy so that if you track a source, you can then filter everything by that source. You can come in and say, I want to see who changed this record from this date, from this source, or I want to see all the things that Zapier did on this date, and be able to see that. And then that will give you the confidence that I can actually track this, I can see my data, I know where it's coming from, I know who it's changing it. And that can kind of be your system of record. Of course, for that to be useful, you've got to connect it to all these other brilliant SaaS products that I mentioned. And one of the things that we struggle with from a product feature perspective at Knack is, what do we build versus what do we try to connect with? Because we could build everything. These are all dealing with data. There could be a case to be made to do a lot more with a lot of these different services. Like, we could just build CRM features out the wazoo for Salesforce. But we don't want to do that. That's just not the best use of our time. We want to find those key features that can really unlock your data, but we're more interested in how we can extend data from a broader perspective to make it useful in ways that each of these services can't. And when I hear stories from everyone here, it's often that, yeah, I had some software over here that was doing that, and I needed to pull it in from over here, but I couldn't quite get it together, and then once it was together, I needed to share it with these people. And that, to us, is where we really see the value of Knack, where you can kind of pull all these things together and then add utility layers on top of it, all in one software. So, of course, we're definitely doubling down on making it easy to do connections, not only with improving what you can do with Knack through Zapier, but we also wanted to design some of our own integrations. And when I say richer integrations, often a lot of today's integrations are one-way streets, right? Which are useful. So, like, something happens in your database, you want to ping someone in Slack. Something happens over here, you want to push it into Knack. But we think that the real value that Knack can add is to make those richer. And by that I mean, if something happens in Knack, not only can we send you, say, a Slack message, but we can include two buttons like approve this, request, yes or no. And yes can actually trigger different logic, different action in Knack. No can actually trigger different logic in Knack. And now you've added a tremendous utility layer to your workflow that's all operating through Knack and your connections. Finally, again, we want to make your data more useful. And I think one of the things that has changed the most from where Knack started to where Knack is now is this notion of workflows, this notion of making your data useful. When we started, all of our keywords were online database. And we thought that this was going to be the thing, people just want to store their data. And of course, that's a major component of it. But as we started adding functionality, as people started using it, it was the workflow that everyone was so excited about. It was, how do I make this data useful? Yes, it's stored there, we need that, but we actually have to have this run our business. We actually have to have this integrate with how we're using this data. We want this to expand what we can do with it. And everything, all the stories that I heard yesterday, none of them were like, yeah, great database. Love storing my database there. It was all about, wow, this data has enabled me to do this. It enabled me to save that. It enabled me to expand into this. And that's all about that utility layer. So that's definitely a major part of our future vision of Knack, really doubling down on the workflow features. You saw that recently with our action links exposure, just adding way more functionality there in terms of what you can do, the triggers that you can have, the actions that you can take, to kind of take that data that's in there and make it useful. So that's our vision for where we're going with Knack. I want to close by bringing this back to you, because this is a unique opportunity for us to kind of hear direct feedback on this vision, how you're using it, and how this aligns with the value that you're getting from Knack. So knowing that we want to get into having Knack be your data of record, your system of record for your data, knowing that we want to make it super easy to connect to all the other things that you need to, knowing that we really want to make this data as useful as it can be for your business, your operations, how can we do that better? How can we do that to fill these needs for you? So I would encourage everyone here, as you're talking with me, of course, with our team, we'd love to hear your feedback directly on this kind of approach, because this is all the future, it's still unwritten, and you're the ones that have the potential to impact it more than anyone. So this is a great opportunity to encourage you all. But I think my time is running out now. But yeah, thank you. Thanks again for coming. Like, we feel like this foundational work is putting us in a place where we're just getting started. In this sense, I feel like we've done all the hard work so that we can now do the brilliant things like we're doing here today, having conferences, really taking the product to the next level, really being responsive and proactive to your feedback. And yeah, we're thrilled about the future. We hope that in the future conferences, perhaps back here in London, all of you can look back to that tiny little Knackcon London conference. That was kind of cute. And we add a couple zeros to things, and you can all take credit for being there from the beginning.
Brandon, may I ask?
Sure.
Last night and today, talking to people, obviously everybody's passionate and pleased and really happy with the product, but there was always been one constant underlying concern stroke theme was, and I'm going to summarise it, is what if Mr. Google finds Knack and decides I'm going to buy that? Where do we go? Because we're investing heavily,
Of course.
within you, and I know you're talking in the future, but for me certainly, my company is very reliant upon Knack now.
Yeah, it's funny because the common misconception is, or the common conception is, if you're well funded, that's less of the concern, or if you've got investment, then of course maybe you're in it for the long haul. But that's not the case. Like, you see giant companies being sold, shuttered all the time. Of course, you see that happening with Google all the time. And the main driver for why those are getting sold are never because the founders just got sick of what they're doing, right? It's often because they took that investment approach, right? Like, they very deliberately early on said that we are going to get VC, they're going to give us a ton of money, and those VCs are going to expect a return on that, and that's going to influence the decisions that they make. It could be something as simple as, like, our fund is expiring, like the VC's fund is expiring, like, we need to take this offer now. Like, we don't care if you think the timing is right. Like, it's got to happen because we need our money back. And they have to do it because they gave up shareholder rights, they gave up board control, and that's the position that they find themselves. I think by virtue of us being bootstrapped, we're not making decisions on those metrics, right? So all the things that you see about enjoying the journey and about building this team, like, this is what really gets us excited. Like, we didn't do this, like I said, when we started from the web design agency, like, financially we were doing fine. Like, we had no necessarily financial incentive just to, like, hey, let's throw this away and go chase this. That was a huge risk. We did it because we were excited about solving the problem. We did it because we had a passion for seeing this space and the impact that we could make in it. So, of course, I can't tell you it's never going to happen. I can't predict the future. Like, it'd be disingenuous of me to suggest otherwise. Mm-hmm. But I think what you can put some trust in is that our motivations are much different than what you will typically see in the media or maybe have experience with products that you've used that have gone through that cycle of purchase and then getting shuttered. The acqui-hire, which of course is a terrible term, like, an acqui-hire is not going to happen at Knack. I can guarantee you that. There might be some amazing opportunity that comes up that we have to consider, but a part of that consideration would be, what does that mean for our team? What does that mean for our customers? What does that mean for me personally? I'm not just the type that's wired to, go fishing and play golf every day. Like, whatever opportunity might come along, like, I love being in this space. I want to solve problems in this space. So maybe that's not a sufficient answer, but that's probably the best answer I can give you.
Thank you.
Do we have time for any more?
We have time for probably one more.
Great. Anyone else have any questions on what we said here?
Just to carry on from that question. So if I handed 15 million to you for your company.
15 million? Get out of here.
And he means pounds.
I multiplied by 1.1.
And you decided, well, actually, we can go and do something else I want to create, if then the buyers decided to stop this, is there a backup though? Is there a
Like an escrow agreement?
Yeah, is there guys, this is happening, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be loaded, so I'm going. Here's a solution, you will not be left, it'll be static, maybe, I think it's not going to develop anymore, but we're going to give you something to continue so you're not left in the lurch, because we're going to turn off our servers and stuff and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it would totally depend. First of all, I don't think that premise is very likely at all, because like I said, I think if like an opportunity did come along, it would be because there was strategic alignment, right? Like there's someone else in the space that doesn't have what we have. Like what we've done is very difficult. There's a lot of people that are doing isolated cases of it very well. There's form companies that do form things better than Knack will ever do form things. There's Zapier that are doing connection things better than, et cetera, et cetera. There's of course like BI companies that are doing BI better than we'll ever do BI. But those verticals are all fairly saturated and all fairly difficult to get into. And I think the vision that I showed today is much more difficult to execute on. And it would be, the more likely scenario would be a company that's already in the space is very interested in kind of pulling things together, using what we've had to both extend that and then get theirs, get that BI piece or whatever it could be. So I think like if there was a scenario, that would be the likely one. But even having said that, to speak to your worst case scenario, like I could totally see that like being something like that the case. If it was something like it would be hard for me to sleep at night knowing that like it's just so not true to everything that we built here and everything that we've kind of, all the values that we put in from the beginning, just to say like, whoop, forget it. And I know that's not something you can count on, of course, but yeah, I could certainly see something like, hey, this is happening, and it's happening X amount of months from now. We want to treat you right. Here's our options. Here's how we can do this.
Okay, so we won't be left high and dry.
No, that
worst case, even worst case.
Right, like that's something personally that.
Company goes bust, or whatever.
Well, yeah, if the company goes bust, then it's even more like, hey, sorry guys, but like, how can we, everything, like we're here today because of everyone here. Like we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you. Like that's something that we do not take for granted. So even in that case scenario, yeah, it would totally be like, yeah, how can we make this right? What can we? I mean, and at that point, it's even easier because we're going out of business. So in your scenario, so here, take her good bits.
I think to come in on that, I think it's probably a team that's going through everyone that's here today. It's a concern. I think it's part of the journey as to why we're here today is to understand a bit more about the business. I mean, personally, we spent 4 or 5 years invested in that, and we started small and we've grown, and we're at a junction kind of going right. There's a business.
Who are these guys?
Who are
Should we
these
really
guys?
be giving our critical data to them?
Yeah, if this goes in the morning, our business effectively goes. We've invested that heavily in it. But if there's a call we're making, do we now take it off? Do we move forward? We do have some negatives more around performance, for example, and they, for us, it's key to understand where you're going with the platform. And ultimately, it's our decision. We have to make a call. Have we heard enough? Are the guys genuine? What are their plans? There's no guarantees, but ultimately, it's a decision you're going to have to make yourself. But all you can do is get the facts, or get some new information. So.
And can I just say, I share that anxiety, but actually thinking it through is actually a huge credit and compliment to what you've built, because in effect we're able to build businesses on this platform. We're in effect partnering with you, even though the first time that we met you. Right. So I have that anxiety, but I think it's a positive in the sense that it's such a good product that in effect you think, should I employ someone on the basis of this product? Someone who's never done a line of code in their life, So yeah, I'm reassured to hear that. I appreciate you go so far, but it's actually quite a compliment that we're even thinking this.
I couldn't agree more, because I think what separates Knack and what we find so gratifying, and why honestly the growth at all costs is such less of a concern for us, is because we get to see that impact that we make. We don't have a million customers that kind of tangentially use us to make some incremental improvement. People use us for critical foundational things, and that's amazing, and we love that. And that's what gets us so excited about this. That's what gets us so motivated. And hopefully you saw that a little bit with our past here and what we've been working on. By spending so much time on those foundational buckets, those were not short-term gains. Those were not, we have to maximize revenue, right? A lot of decisions that we've made have been painful short-term because we're playing a long-term game. Putting these foundations in place now, you've all probably noticed that our feature release cadence has been less recently than what it's been. Like, that's not a good short-term play if we're constantly trying to get payoff on marketing budgets, right? Or meeting some kind of investor metrics. It's all about revenue growth. It's all about month over month, quarter over quarter. We don't care about that because we're able to play the long game. We can say that that's not important to us now. We're going to really focus on these core foundational pieces that have to do with performance, that have to do with security, that have to do with backups and recovery and these types of things, so that everyone here can feel better about the long term, and we can feel better about the long term.
Excellent, thank you, Brandon. We're going to take a break for a few